Now, we've been hearing lots and lots recently about inflation, the problems that we're having at the moment, and how basically the government are trying to deal with it. So inflation at the moment is currently sitting at 9.4%. Is a massive, massive talking point. So to deal with this, we've got Adam, who works for us in digital marketing.
Right.
He's going to be asking the questions, so at least you just don't have to listen to my monotone voice the whole time. So we can kind of switch it up a bit.
So first of all, big question really, what is inflation?
Inflation is the rate at which costs rise. So at the moment, inflation rate is 9.4% up on what it was last year. And that's over a mixture of goods and services. It could be everything from shopping through to petrol. It's basically the cost of everything kind of all combined. So it's almost 10% more than what it was this time last year, hence inflation being 10%. 9.4% what it was before. And that's actually expected to maybe go into double figures in the next few months or so. So inflation is basically just the measure of how quickly costs have risen over the last year or so.
Why does inflation rise?
To have inflation in the economy is good because it means you've got a little bit of growth as you go along. In fact, the Bank of England is targeted to get inflation to around about 2%. So at the moment, we're kind of nearly 5 times that. That's the reason why the Bank of England are kind of freaking out a little bit and trying to get it all under control. So they want rates to be around about 2%. So a nice, slow, growing economy means that people can plan. Investment will continue to kind of come into the UK. It's to be a nice, solid, safe investment. The problem you've got when rates rise too high and too quickly is the fact that nobody really can plan as to what's going on. It looks unsteady and just creates a whole host of other problems. So the Bank of England's job is to kind of try to keep inflation to around about 2%. At the moment, inflation has risen for a number of factors. So normally we'd get inflation because people spend too much money. Normally there's too much money in the economy, everyone gets excited, everyone's buying too much stuff. So everyone thinks the future's going to be fantastic, everyone's buying, holidays like they're going out of fashion, spending money on new shoes, buying absolutely everything they can. And because of that basically causes inflation because everyone's buying more stuff, so it means demand is a hell of a lot more than what it was before, and generally that kind of pushes costs up. Now, I suppose it's a bit like, similar to, I know, Adam, what are the things that you like to buy, for example?
I buy a lot of protein powder.
Have you seen the price of that go up?
I have recently, yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. So basically what happens is there's a movement towards, say, for example, getting fit and that sort of stuff, and a massive uptake in people who want to try and get fit, who want to kind of buy protein in order to make themselves feel better. And, maybe there has been a bit of an uplift in that since COVID. Everyone's got to be comfortable after everyone decides that, in lockdown, everyone's decided they want to get fit and that sort of stuff. So there'll only be a certain level of protein available to basically buy. Yeah. Now you've got loads more people trying to buy that protein. People are going, actually, maybe we can get away and charge a little bit more for it. So your protein will find its own cost as time goes on. And what's happened, of course, is that, as the price of protein goes up, that basically part of that is inflation because more people want that.
Yeah.
Now, what's happening at the moment is not necessarily demand for that protein that's kind of causing that. It's also as well the cost to probably manufacture and secondly transport everything. So where we've seen the cost of petrol go up, and that can be due to many things. Normally it's the cost of crude oil. Loads of people are putting that towards, for example, now we've got more demand. So for example, now we've got the likes of people now wanting to go back on holiday. We've got people commuting all the time. We've got people basically using transport a hell of a lot more, and all that transport needs fuel. And when you combine that then with the likes of, the invasion of Ukraine and so on, and maybe, countries trying to choose countries other than Russia, it's all causing this massive increasing cost of kind of fuel. Now, once fuel price goes up, everything kind of is impacted because everything needs to travel from one place to another in order to get to us, which are suppliers. Yeah. We also find that as well, with the price of crude oil going up, everything that's made from that, things like plastics and so on, so packaging, that's all now more expensive as well. So it's not necessarily the cost or the rise in the demand for the actual product that people are buying. It's the fact that a lot of it, I believe, has been caught. The energy prices as well is all adding to it. A lot of it comes from this a huge increase in the cost of crude oil, basically, and that's what's causing these huge, massive spikes. I say once it goes on to fuel, then everything becomes more expensive for no matter what it is, because then you have to kind of transport it here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. So basically, we're finding that the cost of products is going up monumentally because of a lot of it to do with the cost in fuel as well as a little bit of cost of demand. The Bank of England have got to try and keep this under control, and they principally do this by interest rates. So if, say, for example, you had a mortgage, and let's say, for example, you interest rates have gone up, it's basically squeezing you every single month, so you have less and less money to basically spend. Now, because you have less and less money to spend, if we come back to your example with kind of protein, for example, is that now not so many people are buying protein anymore the companies are selling it have to start do deals on it and that sort of stuff. So what happens is because everyone gets pushed so hard, they then stop spending.
Yeah.
And when they stop spending, then you'll tend to find the price of that comes down where people are still trying to sell it. So overall, it's a shame that it's not necessarily being caused by the cost of what people are buying going up. There are other external factors which you can't help, such as the cost of fuel and crude oil and that sort of stuff. So what the Bank of England having to do at the moment is to squeeze people almost so hard that they completely stop spending. The price of stuff falls, hoping they can get that back under control. So basically, what the Bank of England are basically hoping is that they should get rates under control. Hopefully, they should start to decrease by kind of next year and the year after that. They're aiming to get it down to around about 2% or so. So potentially, we can hopefully Bank of England hopefully be able to get rates back towards a target of 2% per year.
That's a big jump though from where we are now to there.
And it means that, so you're really hearing it everywhere. We're hearing things like, all we have to do is open up a newspaper or turn on TV and we're like, crisis, cost of living crisis, because it is generally can see that everything has gone up and everyone is feeling the squeeze a little bit.
Yeah.
So anything that's non-essential, people are completely cutting back on. We are ourselves. I think everyone is. Everyone's kind of really cutting back and spending, really being careful of every single penny and pound. Make sure they're really researching out the best deals and everything they possibly can to make sure that they're spending as least money as possible.
Yeah.
So everyone's now not spending money. Hopefully the demand for goods and services should all drop down, which is going to help the Bank of England get inflation under control.
How does inflation affect mortgage rates?
Basically, the Bank of England have a target on which they have to get to, as we said before, which is 2%. So interest rates are affected in the fact that the Bank of England now have to try and curb inflation. It means they have to try and stop everybody spending. So if they put interest rates up, everyone has less to spend every single month, which will hopefully mean that they're not buying as much stuff, which hopefully means then the inflation will start to fall. So as rates go up, people are spending less and less, which means demand for goods and services basically drops, and hopefully means then the inflation is going to drop down. Now, what will happen after that is potentially where everyone's kind of held onto everything so tight and they're making sure that they're not spending anything, is that potentially the Bank of England in the next year, 18 months or so, we might end up going into recession. So recession is basically deemed as being 2 negative quarters of growth, basically. So that means that people aren't spending quite so much money and people aren't buying quite so much stuff, so it's all starting to shrink down a little bit. So what will happen then as that starts to happen, recession is kind of quite a scary word. Normally we see more employment and that sort of stuff, so ultimately people needed for production and for goods and services and all this sort of stuff. So generally we tend to find that sometimes we'll find that the economy will basically shrink and unemployment will start to rise. So what the Bank of England potentially have to do at that point is to try and basically balance that by maybe reducing interest rates and giving them a bit more money every single month. So say, for example, the government gave you another 200 quid a month, that's going to probably, or your bank gave you another 200 quid a month, that's going to encourage you to basically go and spend more money every month. You're going to feel nice and safe and secure and knowing you've got more money around you, you're going to feel less squeezed. Yeah. So potentially that's how they're going to kind of get everything back on, to get it all back together again and get it all kind of moving again. So, whilst we would expect to see inflation being affected by mortgage rates is not exact. It's not as if inflation comes and interest rates come secondly. It's in fact the Bank of England are trying to up those to try to basically control that increase in inflation basically.
Yeah. What happens when inflation rises too much?
Exactly what's happening now. Is the fact that people have cost of living crisis. They're both struggling to pay kind of bills every month. Businesses are struggling to businesses are struggling to get a grasp of costs and to plan what's going to happen in the future. If inflation's too high in one particular country, that you might find that so many people want to kind of invest in those. That's seen as being a bit of a negative risk factor. That and the fact, it's just that everything's more expensive and everyone's struggling basically, which is not what everyone wants. Yeah. So the Bank have to work really hard to kind of keep that down low and keep it on a nice, even, steady, as long as we can see it as being nice and steady and secure, the Bank of England monetary policy feel that's kind of a really nice way to basically be, rather than being spiking up and spiking down, spiking up, spiking down, spiking up, spiking down and being all over the place. It means that people can't kind of plan moving forwards. It also means as well, sometimes with the cuts that have to happen with inflation, you might find that, as I say, there's much higher unemployment, and always have factors like things like, for example, things like if people can't afford to pay their bills every month, they'll start defaulting. People can't afford to pay the mortgage every month, they'll start defaulting on those. Trying to keep inflation under control is a really difficult thing to do, because there's so many other factors kind of take into advance. So the Bank of England, I think, have got a really, really hard job on their hands.
Yeah, a difficult one. Is there anything you can do to save money with the rise of inflation?
My advice would be just to get the best deal for everything that you possibly can. So just make sure you're not paying for absolutely, over the top for anything at all. Really be much more frugal with your, I know energy is probably the worst one in the world, but there's never been so much, pressure, or people now have a much greater understanding of shopping around for their energy bills than what they had before. People now shopping around for their kind of, water providers. People are shopping around a lot more for everything. Make sure they're really getting the very best of every deal they can. So for any good or product or service you can, I'd say, research it and just make sure you're not overspending. Spend as much time as you can researching that particular thing, and really just get the very best deal for that thing that you're trying to buy. I hope it's answered some of your questions from today. As I say, it's a bit of it's not the easiest subject in the world to kind of understand. So Adam, thank you very much for being our guinea pig and seeing if we can make you understand it or not. Hopefully now you've got a bit of a clearer picture of the way that it works. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.